Hello everyone and welcome to a new video from Your Overwatch. I'm Eddie the Chump and today we're going to respond to Seagull's video from yesterday about the State of Overwatch. We will look to continue the development of that dialogue here today to respond not only to Seagull but also on the direction Ranked needs to take in order to make it the premier mode for the game, because currently it is so frustrating. The most prominent public face of the game, Seagull, was driven to express criticisms, something many of us were surprised to see from the otherwise light-hearted and friendly pro streamer. To summarise Seagull's point of view very quickly, he describes a situation I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. The good games are great, but the bad games are horrendous, and he describes feeling helpless to much of it. Seagull talks a lot about the current meta balance of the game, however, this is a major area we will come to describe as a bit of a blind spot for him later on. In short, hard counters are everywhere, and the more flexible nuance of launch day Overwatch, where almost every interaction had outplay, even when against a soft counter, is essentially gone. In its place is direct hard counters to seemingly everything, meaning that the power creep has gotten so far, if your teammate doesn't swap off or swap to the right thing, it can be the result of a game. Even a top pro Tracer has to swap versus a much lower ranked Brigitte, and dealing with a diving Doomfist or a stun Shatter combo takes almost all agency away from the player as they hope and pray their team lands the proper counterplays to protect them. The room for individual FPS outplays has shrunk considerably, and this boils down to a feeling of helplessness in a lot of matches. Whether you win or lose is almost entirely dependent on the luck of the draw in terms of the teammates you get given and their choices. He does have other concerns too, like the lack of detailed stats in-game to measure performance and work out what might be going wrong, and ult snowballing being a big determining factor in the outcome of matches. All of these things paint the picture that the game now requires more teamwork than ever before to not get rolled, and yet with years passed since launch, players are no more in control of the player experience imposed on them than they were when the game was very different and much simpler. And that's where we come in. Now, I'm going to be completely real with you, a lot of these problems have always been there. We've made loads of videos about most of these subjects. Seagull might have only just woken up to how rife problems with player agency are, because now he's no longer a pro and only plays ranked now. Note, he did admit to being inside a pro player bubble, and we can't blame him. It's easier to ignore how bad ranked is when the Overwatch League is on for us as well. But this feeling of needing your team to be on the right pick. Seagull, this is why everyone wanted role queue for the past few years. The new meta has exacerbated this problem, but it's always been there. Try walking into Eichenwald 3rd, playing the meta main tank Rhine, but with a solo healer Zen. Well, you can't. Ranked players are forced to figure out, well, I can maybe dive with Hammond or Winston to at least commit to some frags because we have no sustain. Maybe I'll play another DPS to overwhelm them with firepower. These are actual ranked mode strategies, but I think we all know this isn't Overwatch. It's a Frankenstein monster of Overwatch gameplay and has always been here for the rest of the players who aren't in top 500 with good team compositions most of the time. This is why we wanted to respond. We appreciate Seagull for expressing his concerns, but want there to be no mistake. This isn't a meta-related problem as such, it's a matchmaking problem. The deep truths of the current meta Seagull describes in his video are largely placeholders to the daily experience the rest of the community was already having for the past 3 years. Overwatch, by design, has always been a team game that requires coordinated play, but how we all play it in solo queue completely disregards that fact. The only way to make it resemble the actual game would be by putting some serious restrictions in place to provide structure from which players would then be able to build upon and learn the actual game rather than how do I frag my way out of this problem. As it is now, Ranked tries to please every type of possible approach to playing the game equally and fails utterly at all of them simultaneously. For anyone who has watched our interview with Scott Mercer, you'll know that the design goals for Ranked are to cater to many different groups of players at the same time. People who just want to chill after work, a distinctly casual set that want to have a quote relaxing time playing Ranked, players who want to improve, so perhaps people who only want to focus on one hero or role regardless of context, and finally, people who actually actually want to play the proper hardcore game that Overwatch is. Making the game fit all of these disparate needs is almost impossible, and the methodology of how Blizzard have tried to make this work reflects this. The game has very few limitations. Players queue into the ladder with no control over the role they'd prefer for team balance purposes, what maps or modes they'd like to play, or even with no knowledge of what roles they will have on their team. You can group up, obviously, but that has disadvantages we've expressed at length, so people generally don't do that, unless you're down to do the work and wait a long time to queue for far harder games. So the result is a slot machine. You pull the lever and hope to not be missing crucial roles for the randomly assigned map. The biggest problem with that is Overwatch is not a simple game. The sheer range of skill sets required to play heroes effectively, the knowledge base to understand relevant win conditions on a vast map pool is huge, and every player is just expected to be able to cope with whatever comes their way. The meta, as Seagull's video illustrates, now requires even more of that teamwork than ever before. Heroes need other heroes' help to get stuff done or stay alive, but this is nothing new. The maps too, since day one, were always built for teams to overcome with hard to execute teamwork. Brutal choke points, severe spawn advantages and disadvantages, these aren't casual design choices. It's why 2CP sucks in ranked. The mode naturally demands players work as a unit, but people often don't or can't, so it plays terribly. All of this is too much and overwhelming, so what happens is players tend to focus on themselves because that's the only control they do have. Because everyone is so free to just do what they want, chaos reigns. That's why the play experience is so uneven. When it's good, it's great. The stars align, you win the Overwatch lottery. When it's bad, well, you all know what happens when it's bad. Ranked is neither casual nor hardcore. It's a bit of a mess. But to be fair, that's quite enough of what's wrong. What can be done about it? Well, Seagull, Jayne, Surefour and xQc talked about a variety of options in their discussion. Blizzard originally had planned for Overwatch to be all 6-stack queues, which Seagull actually believes may have been a better idea after all. Jayne even advocates abandoning ranked entirely. Dismiss it. It's a meaningless joke. If you want to play the real game, look for pick-up games via Discord or find small tournaments to enter, some of which he runs himself. This is a similar argument to the one we heard from Scott Mercer, who said that if you're looking for this more hardcore experience, custom games is the place to do that. However, we don't think players should have to step outside the main game to start playing actual Overwatch, unless Blizzard would allow for third-party matchmaking services like CSGO had. Instead, Blizzard gives only their option to ranked, and by trying to appease everyone all the time, actual Overwatch is played only a percentage of the time, and the rest is a bit of a joke, making for a lot of wasted time and not enforcing the principles of the game. Like Slasher said on Twitter, either make ranked a hardcore game mode or create new modes for the people who want to play the real game. Role queue was obviously discussed, and interestingly, Jayne doesn't really like the idea of role queue, as it is perhaps a little bit too restrictive. Sometimes in real Overwatch, you do want to play triple tank, for example, and some heroes defy easy categorization. Is Hammond a main tank or an off tank? Well, that can depend entirely on the rest of your comp and your game plan. Also, what role a hero is can change depending on certain matchups. Brig is a support hero, but at the pro level, she's played in a DPS slot. As we've said in the past, our counter to this is role queue, even a restrictive one, would make a lot of difference to many levels of play and provide the necessary structure for people to endure less trash matches, even if you have to sacrifice these fringe comps. The good news is that's something Blizzard are aware of, actually. Scott revealed they are exploring this idea precisely because of the benefits it provides in improving the general health of games, despite the negatives it can incur in a few exceptions. More good games is the goal, right? Less randomness, more player agency. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the possible. Ranked will never be perfect. How can it? You're not really supposed to play this game on your own. But if that is the best and easiest way for the majority of people to play, compromises will obviously be needed to make it workable. Surefour had quite an interesting take on the role queue in the debate. There's not actually 3 roles in competitive, there's 6. All 3 roles, damage, tank and support, get split into main and flex variants to cover everything the team needs, as it's the most economical way devised to sort a team in competitive play. The problem is that in ranked, most people don't play those actual roles, they play smaller sets of heroes, often spanning multiple roles. This is how you get a player who has an odd hero pool, like Mei and Winston for example, which isn't a competitive role at all. What happens if Rhine is needed and not Winston? Your team's kinda screwed if your main tank player doesn't really really play main tank. However, we'd argue it's this exact type of problem that needs direct attention from Blizzard. Recognizing that not everyone can play the game exactly how they want all the time is what we need. Mold rank to be less casual into actually being competitive. If the role queue was shaped in that way, the culture of learning your actual role will spread. Fans are very keen to take direction from Blizzard when given, and an overhaul of this magnitude, though it might be painful for some who feel restricted into roles, will make the game playable for once, as you will now have to actually learn your role, not an assortment of mystery heroes. Now that's a much more hardcore way of looking at the game, sure, but in my mind at least, learning the actual game and how it should be played should definitely be part of the ranked experience. Because we already have quick play to do what we want in, ranked should be different, it should be serious. Believe us, we know this intimately. FREEDO plays a great deal of the hero roster, but a few seasons ago wanted to focus on main tank, despite having a god-awful Rhine at the time. It took a lot of hard work to get decent at Rhine, but he actually can now play the role and the game, able to swap when needed, because let's face it, despite Scott Mercer saying they don't want a Reinhardt queue, Rhine at times, and especially on key stages of maps, is a meta character for the competitive game. You often 100% need a Rhine queue for certain maps, or else your team will be at a massive disadvantage, and I say this even though we love to dig into alternative counter meta strategies and freedom of play. That's all great. Do it in your own 6-stack, because trying to impose creative or inventive strategies on a random set of teammates on King's Row isn't a good idea most of the time. Just play Rhine, we all know how to play around that. If you don't want to feel pressured into playing the right hero for the task at hand, that role, and as well, ranked mode itself might not be for you. Quick play is a blast, by the way. We've recently transitioned a lot of our play time into the casual modes of the game because they're actually quite wonderful, and you get the experience you signed up for. Rank should be the same way too, just towards a hardcore direction. It baffles us that this is even a debatable point. Apparently this system is supposed to be a path to pro, but how can it if it's also intended to appease relaxing after work? No, if you want to relax, play quick play, or lose SR, because ranked is supposed to be a hard mode. The good news is, learning roles is about to become much easier in the future. As Scott Mercer did say, they do aim to bring replays to the main game, which will provide vital tools for players to analyze and learn from top players, especially for roles that are hard to learn in the first place. Main tank is much harder than people think, for example, but by watching pro replays, you can start to understand why a pro plays certain heroes where they do, how they win their matchups, and what team play is required to excel. Absorbing this knowledge will make you a better player, if you're so inclined, and up until this year's World Cup, we the player base have never had access to such a privileged perspective. Match stats too help inform players as to where they're succeeding and failing. Scott recognised that in our interview, and he shared that Blizzard are trying to develop a much more substantial match history statistical suite in the future. As he put it, they think it's a good idea to look at that data once you've cooled down after a win or a loss. Now I'm sure Seagull and others would disagree, we might too, but at least it's something. The whole reason the third-party app Pursuit was popular in the first place was because players do want better ways to measure their own performance during the game, which a scoreboard historically would do. Thankfully, Blizzard are responding to that need in some way. If the game is structured to reflect the pro game more closely with the right roles shaping the queue, and the player base has the tools to learn and improve, ranked would become naturally more competitive. To return to Jayne's point about ignoring ranked entirely and instead playing in pugs, this is an area where we think guilds or clans could do some real good. When we spoke to Scott about their delay, he shared with us the fact that Blizzard recognised the potential impact they could have. If there was ever going to be a place for a competitive team-based experience outside of normal ranked, this is where it could take place. Clan matchmaking could be the solution to the team queue dilemma we've all been arguing about for years. Joining a clan takes care of two problems. Firstly, the player pool one. Clans can organise players into large groups from which rosters can be made, and then they can play against other clans' teams in a way that sets the expectations for both sides correctly. You play a clan match, both teams know and understand it's going to be try-hard 6v6. No, I only queued on my own, let me eat this 6-stack thrashing. I mean, we're not totally against that, but we do recognise why a lot of people are. Why Seagull's video is so interesting is because for a lot of people, he's emblematic of Overwatch itself. If Mr. Overwatch is seriously dissatisfied with the game and how it's playing, I think it gives legitimacy to a big proportion of players who are frustrated but might not necessarily know why. Being honest, there's many reasons the game can be so aggravating, as we've talked about here, but the main theme is nobody likes feeling helpless when they play it. Everyone doing their own thing hasn't really worked. It's way past time some structure was put in place for the good of everyone's mental health. Ranked mode needs an overhaul to move into Rank 2.0 rather than Quick Play Plus, which it currently is. Either it's competitive or it's not. Half measures to please everyone, please no one. We know that this is a huge topic, everyone is sure to have their own input, and we welcome you to share it in the comment section down below. We do, after all, want Overwatch to be as good as it can be. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to leave a rating. If you never want to miss another video of ours again, please click the bell icon next to the subscribe button on our channel to join the notification squad. You'll be in great company. And finally, please follow the Your Overwatch Twitter. It's where you can find updates about new videos and other cool stuff. I've been Eddie the Chump, and until next time.